Good morning, Jeff. I hope you're well.
I'm very well, Tom, and I hope you're well too.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So look, Jeff, like me, you've done 20 plus years in the classroom, and now we've both been doing this online stuff now for a few years. How have you found the difference?
I think the biggest difference for me has been the flexibility. My work-life balance situation has improved enormously. I mean, I remember having to get up at 6:30 and travel to you know, a, a centre somewhere in the UK, teach all day for 6 hours, and then come back exhausted. And that I think that change towards being able to be flexible, and it causes me to think about the student in exactly that same vein. I was talking to Erica, one of my students, who said exactly the same thing. Well, how have you found that from your students' perspective?
That 6 hour, that getting them into London, you know, is because they've traveled all that
Yeah,
way, you feel you have to program and schedule it for 6 hours. But that's not the best learning environment. I can remember having to stand on the desk. I can remember having to shout and scream to keep them awake, to keep them engaged. And that was one of the challenges. And of course, online, that's just not a challenge, is it? The engagement is there, isn't it?
yeah, that's been one of the big surprises for me, I think, actually, because one of the accusations, if you like, of a face-to-face compared to a digital course is the engagement is, if you like, weaker with the digital course, but that's just not been my experience at all. My experience is that this morning, for example, I turn on my computer and there is one of my students from my September course, one of my students from the December course is, asking questions and getting engaged. And, these are group WhatsApp chats. And I know that you use the WhatsApp chat, and it's just tremendous. There's no
I
shy student.
No, no. I mean, I call them my keyboard warriors. When
Yeah.
when in the old days I would be looking to check the learning and ask for people to understand and ask me questions and leave a silence. Sometimes it was intimidating, I think, for some students to display and to want to ask their questions in fear of this kind of display of ignorance. But if
Mm,
they can just WhatsApp me, if they can just privately and quietly and anonymously and just WhatsApp, it creates more engagement, doesn't it?
Absolutely agree. I think if I look back at my teaching, without dwelling on that at all, used to be dominated. The questions were dominated by two or three people, whereas now everyone gets engaged. And I think you do the same as I do. I give them the ability to communicate via WhatsApp in a group, so they can all chat to each other. The sort of rules about, when it comes to technical commentary, that comes from me because I'm the expert. We don't want the blind leading the blind too much, I suppose. I mean, I think that's reasonable. But if a student wants to talk to me privately in what they think it's a silly question, and it's very often not a silly question, it's a very good question, but they can ask me privately. And that's really, I think the engagement level's fabulous from that point of view.
Do you know what? I think in all my years of teaching, I've never been asked a silly question.
Mm.
It's validated to me where the student is at and how I need to address. Sometimes there may be basic questions or fundamental questions, but I've never been asked a silly question. I love being asked questions. I
Yeah.
love talking about SBR.
Please don't do that. but but yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've got a series in my YouTube channel on, is this a silly question? Is rolling budgets a con? For example, I got asked that. Is it a silly question? And there are many of these things that students think are silly questions, and they're not. And WhatsApp, of course, encourages them to ask that of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So so in terms of going forward, I mean, I think there was fuel put on the fire of online learning because of the pandemic.
Mm.
But I don't see online learning going away at all. I see it has many advantages, a few disadvantages perhaps, but how do you see the future, Jeff?
It's a very good question, that, isn't it? Because obviously we're concerned about that as tutors, as digital tutors. I think the quality stands up for itself, and I think more and more students will see it a bit like one of my students from the June course, really nice chap called Reese, who said, once I've done digital, Jeff, I'm not going back. Once I've done
Absolutely.
digital, I'm not going back, because he said it's opened his eyes as to the quality and the flexibility, as we talked about, when to study, what to study. What to study. There's a very interesting sort of point, isn't it? What to study. If they don't want to look at IFRS, or they don't want to look at group accounts, or they don't want to look at rewards on my courses, they can look at something else. You can't ask your tutor, can you, in a classroom to study? No, I don't want to do that today. I want to do something else. It's
You
incredibly
You
flexible.
mean if they've got a headache and they just want to study something lighter for
Mm.
them, they can choose that. I hadn't thought of that before.
No,
That's
well,
great. Yeah,
it's very
that's
true, isn't
another
it?
yet another advantage. Yeah, and they can
Yes.
turn us off at any time, can't they? They can they can they can put us on pause. I mean,
Yeah.
I like to think they put us on repeat and they hear it again. And I know that is the case sometimes, but they can also just switch us off if their auntie phones up, or they want to make a cup of tea. That's their
Yeah.
prerogative, isn't it?
I think that's right. And we talked about this earlier, didn't we? But the quality is guaranteed, isn't it? You've no downtime as a tutor on a digital course. If it doesn't work out quite right, if it doesn't come out quite right, I've got a button on my keyboard called F9, which you and I know means pause, and then I'll re-record it so it comes out perfectly. Yeah. So, and I think the quality will be better. I think not equal. I think it will be better. There's no tired tutor in this environment, is there?
They've captured the best of you. That's what you're saying, isn't it, Jeff?
Of course.
Good, good. Well, I think we could, two of us, probably talk forever, but thank you very much for our conversation, Jeff.
Thank you, and nice to see you in a great shirt as usual.
Well, I see you've risen to the
I
occasion
have
and
tried my best.
got a nice one as well. We'll leave it to the viewers to decide.
Indeed. Well, thanks very much for the brief conversation, Tom.
All right. Cheers, Jeff. Take care, mate.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.